So I will go ahead and get started. My name is Kathy Mccall. I am the advocacy director here at AARP here in Washington State. We have roughly 900,000 members in the state and work on a variety of issues. But I always like to say that those issues are, kind of priority number 1, number 2, and number 3 are around long-term care. And it's everything from retirement savings to health security to just life and enjoying your life and having housing and having access to reliable transportation, walkable parks, just a variety of things. So as you age, so that's why AARP was very involved in the support of the passage of the Long-Term Care Trust Act, which is now called the WaCares Fund. And so we are hosting these kind of information sessions for our members. And we will be recording this on the cloud and be able to send you a link if you miss this or have to come in or leave at any part of it. We'll also be sharing it out to about 3,600 members that we sent this email to. And we know, conflicts and people just, have interest in some things and not in others. But wanted to just let you know that. So if you have a question, there's not a chat feature when we use the Zoom webinar, but you can put your questions into the Q&A section down below. And we will be trying to get to those at the end of the presentation. And great, Representative Hackney is here. We were just starting to open up and do some introductions. So welcome, Representative Hackney. So we're just in the process of starting introductions. And so I also wanted to say that today AARP is releasing also some statewide data that we just did about the WaCares program. We know that there's a lot of negative messaging out there right now, but what was really great about the survey data that we had is we have about 51% of the survey respondents said that they actually like the WaCares program. And what is really great is that percentage increases as they hear about the features of the WaCares program. That one, if you have a pre-existing condition, you're not going to be denied coverage, that you don't pay for this past your retirement, you only pay during your working years, that you can pay a family caregiver. All of those exponentially increase people's favorability on all sectors, from those who already favor it to the ones that are opposed to it. 9% who were strongly opposed actually move up into more of a favorability. So we thought that that was really good news. Again, we just got this data kind of all finalized and are releasing it out. And I'll make sure to send it to you, Senator Hasagawa and Representative Hackney and Sidlock, so that Representative Berquist has that as well. So I'd like to go ahead and start out with kind of our agenda for today. First, I'd like to have each of you, and again, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate your time, and especially on this very important and very topical, relevant, current issue. So I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to say hello, and if you have any kind of story or anecdote around long-term care that you'd like to share, that would be great. And again, let's start with Senator Hasagawa.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So thanks for convening this community conversation in the 11th District. And I'm Bob Hasagawa, State Senator for the 11th District. And I've been in the Senate now. I've been through 9 sessions in the Senate. And prior to that, I was in the House for 8 years. And, we're going through a redistricting process right now. And unfortunately, in none of the maps am I in the 11th District again. So I think the message is being sent that my time in the 11th is short-lived, possibly, unless I stay in Tukwila. At any rate, so I think you wanted us to talk a little bit about, well, the question that was asked of us is, why do we support the Washington Cares Fund? And do we have any, what are we hearing from constituents? So actually, to be honest, what I'm hearing from constituents is running about 100 to 1. I mean, literally not in favor of it. Just to be honest with you all. And I actually thought that the Washington Cares Fund, well, I voted for it because basically it's the only program out there that has been presented to us, even though I did feel that there were some fundamental problems with it at the time. But since then, we've entered into this COVID era, and I'm very concerned about, the exacerbation of the existing inequality, income inequality, as it's manifesting itself in homelessness and people who are really struggling to make ends meet, and then putting a payroll tax on top of that. So, there's a lot of issues. Excuse me, I guess my answering machine, I don't know if you can hear it in the background picking up my phone, but it just seems like really bad timing when people are really struggling. Certainly there are plenty of people who are doing really well during this period of time, but we've heard of the numbers of people, what's going to happen when the rental moratorium, eviction moratorium ends, and how are those people going to be able to make ends meet, especially with unemployment supports from the federal government going away. And the other issues I've heard is about the portability of the program. But my feeling is, and this is an issue that definitely needs to be addressed, but I think the way that we're addressing it is exemplary of the Band-Aid approach we follow to deal with pressing social issues. We all heard of the silver tsunami, but we've got some fundamental problems that we have to fix. Right now, we don't have a real vision for what Washington State should be like in the future. Long-term care should be one of them, but why shouldn't it be incorporated as maybe a branch off of, funded through a universal health care program, where everybody gets the coverage they need or supports they deserve. But then you can't look at things in a silo either. So, what about the housing then? It used to be back in the day where we used to provide housing for seniors and levels of care that are necessary. And then with that comes also a workforce question. Once the silver tsunami hits, do we have sufficient workforce to support all the seniors that are going to need support? So there's so many different issues, and by addressing it with this Band-Aid approach, what we really need to do is take a step back and try and build momentum for a vision of Washington State for the future that we can all get behind, and we all know where we're going, and develop a strategic plan on how to get there. So I think, we have to talk about progressive tax reform, and how we get revenue from those who are getting the most out of the system. They're morally obligated to put the most back into the system that created their wealth to begin with. And then there's a question of how do we best use those resources, which, I've been supportive of a state bank, public bank that's owned by the people of the state, rather than giving our tax dollars over to Wall Street investors so that they can use our tax dollars to make money for themselves. And then in the meantime, if we want to do anything, we have to sell bonds to finance it. That doesn't really make sense. Having a universal health care plan, a strategic housing plan, a broad-based economic development and workforce training system. So there's so many pieces that need to be fixed, and we make a mistake when we view them in their own little silos, because it's like squishing a balloon. You squish the balloon and then air pops out someplace else, and we can't contain it all. We have to deal with it as a unified system. So anyway, that's my thoughts. And I just thought I'd pass it along to you all.
I appreciate your thoughts, and the 11th district is very lucky to have you. And no matter how redistricting goes, you are a very thoughtful leader and legislator, and considering all of these issues. And I too, see the intersection of a lot of these issues that we're facing as a state: housing and workforce, and income inequality, and just employment opportunities for this generation, the next generation, as people age, and how does that all intersect together. And I think that this is a very significant first step for the state, because we are creating potentially a pipeline also for a lot of new jobs and a lot of new revenue coming into parts of states that will be focused in on the silver tsunami and the revenue generating opportunities that that's going to also create. So we can talk more about that, but I could sit and just talk with you for probably hours. So, but I won't occupy. It's time to let's have Representative Hackney say a few opening remarks.
Thank you very much. David Hackney, newly elected representative of the 11th Legislative District, who lives in Tukwila, and all the maps appear to keep me in the 11th. So yeah, I do have a personal story. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was, sort of suddenly stricken with Alzheimer's. And it was not a gradual decline. It was a rather steep decline. And we were required to find a nursing home for her and 24-hour care. And she didn't have sufficient insurance and was required to use Medicare. One, I wasn't as pleased with the facility, but it was all that our family could do. And secondly, with Medicare, they took the home that I grew, one of the homes, I didn't grow up because I didn't live there, but she's had that home since I was 5 years old and had paid off the mortgage and was very proud of that. And that house was taken from our family to pay for those concerns. I do support the Long-Term Care Act. I recognize with Senator Hasegawa that it is not a very popular program. Many times, what is popular is not always the best public policy. And very much like Senator Hasegawa, there are a number of progressive ideas that I am going to pursue and that we need to work toward, but they're not here. And this, by ignoring or waiting for, a lot of these very, very important progressive ideals to get enacted, we are not addressing this very serious problem that 7 out of 10 Washingtonians do not have long-term care insurance, and it's going to cost the state billions of dollars and of our funds to address that if we don't come up with something. So I am I'm the coalition of what we can do. I would love to stand by and wait for universal health care, wait for comprehensive jobs program, and I am working on these things. And we learned in my first term that we can accomplish difficult things. To me, the biggest obstacle to accomplishing really important things is our failure to even try. I am an optimist. I think we can get things done, but I think it would be irresponsible for the state not to enact the Long-Term Care Act and wait for these other very, very important public policy issues to be enacted. And so oftentimes I'm also with Senator Hasegawa. I would say 100 to 1, my constituents are very displeased with the Long-Term Care Act. They're displeased with the lack of options they have to opt out. They're displeased with the concerns that, if they move out of state, they lose their benefits. Although I understand as more and more states enact long-term care acts, there we hope to be some reciprocity, but it's not something we can promise them today. So all of those concerns are valid. And if there was a better program that could help us achieve the cost savings that we need, I would be 100% for it. I was not in the legislature when this was passed, but I would have voted for it. And that's something I could avoid that question, right? Because I wasn't there, but I would have, because I have been convinced that this was a necessary step. It's like sometimes, you don't decide what medicine to take based on the taste. Oftentimes, some of the bitterest medicine is the most helpful. And not to use too many, analogies, but, rather than wait for a miracle cure, I think we have to take our medicine now. And we can still work on the miracle cures. We can still work on all these progressive values simultaneously. And perhaps if we achieve some of them, like universal health care, there won't be a need for this. We can discontinue it. There'll be other options. But as for now, as far as I know, and this is what we have. And failing to be bold and take on unpopular programs. Again, this job, although we are elected, it is not a popularity contest. I was elected to be the representative to identify good public policy, or at least the best public policy available, and to advocate for that. And that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to take that analogy. I'll attribute it to you, but I really like that analogy that sometimes the best medicine might be that better pill. But it's hard. I mean, this is hard work. I spent a good chunk of my career working with homeless people, and especially I've seen a lot of homeless seniors, and it breaks my heart to see somebody in their 50s or 60s or 70s because they have lost everything. And living on the street or living in a day shelter like Angeline's that's run by the YWCA in downtown Seattle, or on the east side, you have Sophia's Way. It just breaks my heart. There's something wrong with our system when that happens. So I'm okay. This is not about me. This is Mr. Locke. Would you like to comment?
Sure.
And just some welcome remarks.
Yes. First of all, thank you for doing this. And Representative Bergquist regrets that he couldn't be here tonight. He's got a family obligation that he couldn't rearrange, but he is supportive of the Washington Cares Act. And yes, he's generally in step with his seatmates in the 11th district and shares those values and like the long-term vision, but he also thinks that this is a definite positive step forward and that the private market was not doing was not satisfactory for many, many people. We do get a lot of emails that are opposed to it, but I think on every issue, we usually hear from people who are unhappy about something. When people are satisfied, they don't really contact us. And I think that your organization has done some research and some surveys that shows that it is popular when people understand it, and that there's some, maybe shortcomings or problems that need to be addressed, but there's working groups that are going to be working on that. So Representative Bergquist is generally very positive about the steps forward that have been made. And I'm mostly here just to listen to people who have concerns and to relay those messages back to Steve, to Representative Bergquist, so we can continue to do a good job for the district. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Locke. So now I'd like to introduce Ben Vecti. Ben is the program director in DSHS for the WA Cares Fund. And I've had a chance to work with Ben, and I just feel really fortunate that we have him in the state leading this program. He has written papers on very similar programs in other countries, as their populations have aged, much faster. And the United States is a very young country in relationship to some of those other countries. And so I am really pleased to have him in this role. And so he is going to share a presentation. And then again, I'd like to remind the participants, enter your questions that you have into the Q&A. And then we will be taking some of those questions after Ben's presentation. So Ben, take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you, representatives and senators for joining this. I'll try to keep my presentation brief so that we can get to Q&A. Before I get started, we have been dealing intensively with the public as well. So I would just like to say my own observation on this, of working on this over the past couple of years, is that the public opinion polling that the AARP does, I think, gives us a better sense of where the public is on this. Since May or June, the private insurance industry that has been marketing to people to try to get them to buy their product by marketing against the WACARES fund, right? So all summer, especially higher earners have been getting emails telling them why individually the insurance company thinks that they would be better off buying their product than participating in the public program. I don't think that's representative of public opinion. I think that's just a response to a marketing campaign. And hopefully over time, that'll become more apparent. The other thing I would want to clarify is that there is no other solution out there. I've studied this issue for 30 years. I advised the European Union on this, on social insurance programs. I was a professor of comparative social policy for 15 years in Germany. I've studied and published on all the systems that exist. Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, South Korea, all do basically the WACARES fund approach. It's a proven model. It's also the model that Medicare is based on. So it's not a new model, and it's not experimental. It's just the first time we're doing it in this country. And so I think those are all. The other thing is that from 2014 to 2019, there was extensive, careful analysis done by the JLEC, the Committee of Joint Legislative Executive Committee, with testimony from the best experts in the United States, as well as with a series of actuarial modeling studies done by Milliman to support the analysis that led to this bill. And this was they also tried to see if there was any other approaches out there to cover the middle class against this risk. And there were no other approaches out there. There simply aren't. I'm aware of the literature as well. And there aren't any other approaches out there. This is a structural reform which would really create a third pillar of retirement security in Washington state, alongside Social Security and Medicare, of long-term care security. So that's my view on that. Let me share my screen if I could, and I will provide some background on the program, and then we can get to Q&A. So I'll talk a little bit about why we need a new approach to long-term care. Talk about what this program is, why it's good for Washington, why it's good for our families, how it works, and then we'll get to Q&A. So we all have concerns about aging, whether it's about our own future or about a family member or friend. The following two scenarios are familiar to many of us. Barb's mother is in her 80s and keeps falling at home. Now she's broken her arm. She lives alone and there is no family in town to help. Siobhan doesn't want to be a burden to her adult children. They have their own kids to care for. She's having trouble getting in and out of the tub and afraid of falling. These are common concerns that many of us have with aging parents and as we ourselves age. We all have care stories in our families. My dad fell down the stairs in his two-story cabin in the woods last year and nearly died from it. Having access to long-term care could have helped him prevent a decline in his health status. My mother also had Parkinson's for many years, and we didn't have access to a home care aid quickly in that case either. And so I think we all have similar stories in our families that allow us to understand why the current system is broken. as people live longer, dementia is becoming more prevalent, and people often have multiple chronic conditions and medications to take. Have you ever had similar concerns to either of these scenarios? Naomi is afraid her dad's dementia is getting worse. He put plasticware on the stove and nearly burned down his kitchen. He refuses to move to a facility or hire help. Ruben's grandfather could really use medication reminders to keep on top of his insulin doses before he ends up in a crisis, and nutritious meal delivery to keep his blood pressure low. Worry about our parents and grandparents or our own health as we age is something we all need to cope with. And the need for long-term care doesn't always wait until we age. Some people need care at younger ages. Calvin is a working age individual with a need for long-term care following an accident. He has spent most of his savings on medical care and worries he won't have enough to pay for help with everyday activities like getting ready for work so he can lead the life he wants to lead. He has family in his life, but they also work and he doesn't want to cause stress in their lives. He's a young man and values his independence. Long-term care can overwhelm a family's finances. Let's look at these examples. Hakeem turned 50 last year, and after caring for his mom, he realized he needs long-term care insurance but can't afford it. It would cost him $2,700 a year. I want to take a moment here to talk briefly about that. So the average premium for private long-term care insurance nationwide is about $2,770 a year. That is because the current system is simply broken. For 4 decades, the private long-term care insurance industry has tried, with support of policymakers and think tanks, has tried to expand its population reach beyond the wealthy. But only 7% of Washingtonians have private long-term care insurance. And that's the same nationwide. And the reason is because premiums are so expensive. And the thing to keep in mind here is that if you're a 50-year-old, let's say you're a 45-year-old, and you think you're going to work 20 more years and your life expectancy is 85. With the Walk Cares Fund, you would pay in for 20 years from age 45 to age 65. And the average premium is $300 a year. That's $6,000 a year of premiums. If you buy private insurance to opt out of the Walk Cares Fund, you would owe those premiums until the day you die or need care, because private insurance is owed throughout retirement, not just until you stop working, like with the Walk Cares Fund. So you would owe premiums for 40 years times $2,000 or $3,000 a year. So that's $80,000 to $120,000 a year of premiums, of lifetime premiums. So that's $80,000 to $120,000 of premiums versus $6,000 of lifetime premiums for the Walk Cares Fund. You see what a dramatic difference that is. Obviously, that's not something that private insurance brokers tell people when they call them. And the people reaching out to legislators probably don't realize that if they buy private insurance to opt out, that they're committing to $80,000 to $120,000 in lifetime premiums. Many of them are simply thinking that they're going to be able to afford that, but then ultimately won't be able to afford that, and will end up paying in for a few years or 10 years or 20 years. Maybe they can even pay in until they retire, but then when they're on a fixed income and 75 or 80 years old or 85 years old, they may find they can no longer afford it. That the median income of retired households, not individuals, but households in Washington state is $56,000. So after taxes, that might be about $40,000. On $40,000 a year income, no one can afford a premium of $2,000 a year. And so the private insurance is really not an option for anyone but the wealthy. And so if we're thinking about a solution that's good for the middle class as a whole, and not just for the wealthy few, private insurance isn't that solution. The Walk Cares Fund is a way to solve this problem for the broad middle class and make insurance affordable for the broad middle class. It's important also to keep in mind that there is no voluntary solution to this financing problem. The status quo financing approach is that the wealthy have access to private long-term care insurance. And if you're middle class and you become impoverished by the need for long-term care, you can apply for Medicaid. But for the rest of us, we're just on our own. And it means that when you fall down the stairs or when you slip in the shower or when you get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, you're simply on your own. There's nothing there for you. You have to either pay out of pocket, which if you can do it all, you could probably only do for a few months. And then you'll have to apply for Medicaid, go to a nursing home prematurely, most likely. That is the status quo approach. The only solution that's out there is the Walk Cares Fund, which works just like Medicare, where we all pay in a little bit out of every paycheck in order to, and if we all do that together, it makes the premium affordable for everyone, just like with Medicare. And then we have a societal solution where we all pay in, we all benefit. There is no third door, there is no third way, there is no voluntary social insurance approach. That doesn't exist because voluntary programs are what we already have. Private insurance is voluntary today. When you have a voluntary program, you have what's called adverse selection, where the people most likely to need the product buy it. And so that's what we have today. And people don't try to buy private long-term care insurance until they're 60 on average. And the people trying to buy it typically are the ones who think they're going to need it, because if you don't think you're going to need it, you're not going to pay for it. And because of that, the insurance companies have to price that coverage at a very high price point because they're getting older people who are higher risk trying to buy the product in the first place. So that is the status quo. And the choice we have as a state is to continue with that status quo or to proceed with the Walk Cares Fund, where we have affordable long-term care insurance for everyone because we're all in it together. We're all paying in and we're all benefiting, just like with Medicare. So family caregivers also need support. One thing to keep in mind here is that when someone needs long-term care, it not only affects them individually, it also affects their families, because if I'm 80 years old and I need care, let's say I opt out of the Walk Cares Fund, which I wouldn't do because I'm the director, but if I were to do that, and I'm 80 years old and I need care and I opted out, I got private insurance, I couldn't maintain it because I couldn't afford to pay it permanently. So I dropped it eventually, and then I'm not protected and I'm 80 years old. Well, you might say, well, that's my own fault. I chose to opt out. You know, I'm at the bottom of the stairs on my own. That's my fault. I didn't prepare, right? That wouldn't be a very humane view of the situation, but you might take that view. But what about my spouse and my children? So if that happens to me, my spouse might decide that she has to quit her job to care for me. That happened in my family when my mom needed care. Her husband had to quit his job at age 60 to care for her. And he cared for her for 5 years. And when he tried to get back in the workforce after she passed away, they wouldn't hire him back. And so he ended up having to retire at age 60. He was a low income, he was a low earner. And his own retirement security was devastated by the fact that my mom needed care and hadn't prepared. And same thing could go for people's children. So if I'm 80 years old and I need care and I haven't prepared, my son might decide, or my daughter might decide, that they move across the state or move across the country, quit their current job to take on a job nearby, and get off their career track and permanently hurt their earning capacity, their economic security, and their retirement security in order to care for me. An AARP study found that 1 out of 6 people who care for an older adult suffered those kinds of consequences in their career. And a MetLife study found that the typical person who leaves the workforce to care for an older family member loses on average $300,000 in lifetime earnings and retirement benefits through their 401k and Social Security. Because once you leave the workforce, you stop paying into your 401k, you stop earning retirement benefits through Social Security, and it has a permanent effect on people's economic security. So
and I just wanted to add one point to that, is AARP also did a study that found that family caregivers pay about $7,200 out of pocket per year to help care for a loved one. So help maybe pay for rent or medication or transportation or medical devices or, you know, what have you, but they're paying out of pocket. And it also disproportionately impacts women, who tend to be the ones that are the care providers, and they leave the workforce oftentimes in their prime earning years to care for a loved one. And like you mentioned, it's hard for women, you know, in their 50s or 60s who have been caring for a 70 or 80-year-old family member. to get back into the workforce and still earn the same amount that they were making when they left.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. And that highlights the fact that the status quo approach, which, as I mentioned, is broken, it's predicated on the assumption that women will do this for free, right? And that is an outdated assumption that is devastating and disrespectful, quite frankly, of women's careers. Our system assumes that families all have a stay-at-home caregiver who can do this for free and will do this for free. And that may have been true in the 1950s, but it probably wasn't even fully true then. But now it certainly isn't true with income inequality, as Senator Hasegawa mentioned at the outset. Most families need all adults at home to be in the workforce. And so there are no stay-at-home family caregivers who can afford to quit their jobs for several years. And oftentimes it's not just one older adult they have to care for. First it's a father, then it's your spouse's father, then it's someone's mother or an aunt or uncle. And it can really hurt families' economic security. For the state of Washington, if you look at this blue line, you see that this problem, which affects families on an individual basis, is also affecting our state as a whole. The population 85 and older is going to double over the next 15 years. That means that not only will a lot more individuals need care, it also means that the women in their 40s and 50s are increasingly going to have to leave the workforce or turn down promotions to care for family members, which hurts them, but it also hurts their employers, who will not be able to fully leverage their abilities. And this could in turn mean that taxes have to go up to like sales taxes or other taxes to pay for this. In the last 2 years, 6.3% of our budget prior to COVID went to long-term care. With the age wave hitting the state in the coming 15 to 20 years, that could double, caseloads could double, and with that, spending on Medicaid could double, which would force the state to raise sales taxes to pay for that if the Walk Cares Fund didn't exist. So the Walk Cares Fund is a step towards addressing this issue. And it's a revolutionary step. This is not a minor reform. This is a reform equivalent to the enactment of Social Security or Medicare. It's a fundamental improvement to retirement security in Washington state. It's a universal program like Medicare. It's an earned benefit, just like Medicare, where only those who pay in would benefit. It's self-funded from worker contributions. It's affordable by definition. So if someone loses their job because of the pandemic and they're unemployed, they don't owe a penny to Walk Cares, not a penny. You only owe money to the Walk Cares Fund if you're earning. And just like with Medicare or any social insurance, it's affordable by definition. So if you're making the median wage of $50,000, $52,000, then you owe $24 a month to this program for your premium. If you're making a third of the median wage, then you only owe $8 a month to this program. Low earners also get a fantastic deal from this. So if you're 45 and you're only making, and you make the median wage, you pay $6,000 into this program over your lifetime, and you get a $36,000 benefit. It goes up over time, so by the time you claim it, it'll be much higher. So it really helps low earners disproportionately. So that's, from an income inequality perspective, that's important to keep in mind. Contributions begin in January, benefits begin in 2025. The benefit is flexible, so you can choose to either hire a professional home care aide or, and this is of particular interest, I think, to lower income families, you can also pay a family member. And by doing so, that helps keep the money in the household. It helps you pay your bills. So not only do you get access to long-term care, but if you have a family member who's providing the care, they can get paid for it, which really helps the family get through this difficult time. The employers do not owe a matching contribution. It's just an employee-funded program. Contributions go to a dedicated trust fund that can only be used for this program. If you have private insurance, you can keep it. You don't have to opt out just because you have private insurance. You can keep both. And in fact, we're working with private insurers to develop supplemental coverage that would allow people to have more coverage if they want it. I think I'll go through, I want to get to the Q&A, so I want to get through this quickly. The current vesting rules are that you have to pay in for 3 out of the last 6 years to be eligible for benefits, or if you've paid for 10 years, you're permanently vested. I will also add that our oversight body, the the LTSS Trust Commission is looking at a policy option which would enable people to continue paying in voluntarily after retirement if they want to get to that 10-year vesting threshold after they retire. So we're aware that right now it's a little bit hard for people close to retirement to vest. So the commission is looking at recommending that people be given the option to pay in voluntarily after retirement in order to permanently vest. They're also looking at the issue that was mentioned at the outset about portability, about ways of addressing that. So that's something that they're also considering making recommendations on. I think with that, I will just tell you in closing, here's our website. If you have more questions, you can go to the website, or you can email me at this email address below. In closing, I just wanted to highlight again that the solution that the Walk Cares Fund offers is the only solution that is out there currently. The only thing else that's been proposed nationwide or internationally is kind of throwing money at this problem on a short-term basis. At the federal level, there is been proposals to spend a lot of money on long-term care for 4 years. And then after those 4 years are over, we're back to where we are now with a broken system. The Walk Cares Fund is a structural reform like Social Security or Medicare that transforms this issue and creates an architecture, a permanent architecture by which we all pay in a little bit out of our paychecks and have access to affordable long-term care when we need it. And that's an architecture which could also be used to expand in the future to cover universal healthcare if that were someone's intention, or it could just be left as it is. But it's a structural reform that solves this problem in perpetuity, as opposed to throwing money at it for a short term or trying to subsidize the private insurance industry temporarily, which has been tried in the past and there's no evidence that that's a pathway to success. And there are no, opting out is a way that individuals can maybe address their own need for long-term care, but it is not a structural approach that allows the middle class as a whole to have access to affordable long-term care insurance. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Ben. And as always, I always learn more every time I hear you speak. One of the questions that we get a lot at AARP is about people who are near retirement. So, they're 2 years away. And you mentioned the 3 of the 6 years, but you didn't really kind of go into the 500 hours, which I think is something a lot of people don't realize, and they don't understand. 500 hours is 10 hours a week of working, and you still continue to vest. And one of the things I've been saying to a lot of people who are near retirement is a lot of people, take off, a couple of years, go travel, go hang out with the grandchildren, and then they're like, now what? What do I do? And some go into consulting, but I wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on that again, and just, is that correct? Am I making the right assumptions?
Sure. I mean, most of us, most people do work in retirement. The term retirement doesn't mean what it meant 30 years ago. There was a short window in American history when this idea of retiring at 60 and then going to move to Sun City, Arizona and playing golf all the time was some kind of a vision that, at least in the marketing world, was a reality. For most people today, most Americans today, most Washingtonians, people end up having to work longer than they had hoped to. Or if they're able to afford to retire from their main career job, they often either choose to go back to work after a year or two part-time in order to help pay the bills or help finance a vacation, or they choose because they just got bored being retired and they want to pursue a passion or an interest that they've had, like starting a winery or making something like kayak paddles and selling them on Etsy, or maybe they want to help their children in their business. There's a lot of things that people might do. And so for any year in which someone works 500 hours, which is about a day and a quarter a week, they can earn an additional vesting year towards their Walk Cares benefits. So if there's a part-time employee or as a self-employed person for about a day and a quarter a week, that's enough to earn a vesting year, and that'll get you towards your 3 or 10 vesting years in WACARES. But I also want to underscore that this commission is giving very strong consideration, even aside from that, to making it easier for people close to retirement to voluntarily continue paying in to invest in this program.
Somebody asked me this week, they said, what if I babysit my grandchildren? What if my daughter was paying me and, we set up a W-2, would that count? And I was like, I'm going to be on a call with Ben Vecti. I'm going to ask him, because I haven't heard that before, but I was curious.
Sure. I mean, you could do that, but you could even do it as a self-employed. It doesn't need to be a W-2. As a self-employed, right? For any year of self-employment, you can then you'll be able to go to our website and then just pay in based on your net earnings for the year as a self-employed person. And as long as you work 500 hours, you'll be able to earn a vesting year doing that.
Okay, thanks. So let me take one of the questions from the Q&A. So there's a question from, okay, again, a near retiree. He is going to retire in 5 years and he says, I don't mind paying into it. I just wish I could benefit. I could really see this helping me and my wife. And I guess, do you want to talk, the Trust Commission is looking at this issue very seriously.
Yes, and I would encourage, in that situation, talk to your legislators about that. The Trust Commission is very much aware of this issue. There are, about 20% of the workforce is in the same situation, close to, between 55 and 64. So you're not alone in this, and we received emails on this as well, and we've let the commission know the volume of emails we received on this issue, and they're very attuned to it. So stay tuned and let your legislators know if that's something you're concerned about, and let the process work. And we'll see if this gets changed.
So it's more of a comment, but it's kind of a question. It says, I'm happy to see this program is coming. I tried to buy long-term care insurance, but I have a pre-existing condition and the premiums that I was quoted are way beyond my means.
Right. I mean, thank you for that comment. Yes, and it's frustrating. I know a lot of people are frustrated by private insurance. That's not new. I mean, private long-term care insurance, it's been a frustration both for those companies and for consumers, because the business model simply hasn't worked. Because of adverse selection, what I mentioned before about people waiting to buy it till they need it, and then people waiting until they're older, and then people who apply for it often are higher risk. The pricing on those is so expensive that people can't afford it, and that's one of the main reasons why we have the WACARES Fund. This was studied very carefully from 2014 to 2019, and it was determined that the only way to make coverage affordable for Washingtonians was to have a universal program where everyone pays in out of every paycheck from their first job to their last job. And by doing that and having everyone in the same risk pool, we're able to have a very affordable premium, about $24 a month for everyone.
So another question is, the benefits seem so small. How did you land on 36.5? And what does that mean in terms of actually a benefit? Sure.
The benefit is significant. It's $36,500 more than most people have, than 93% of people have today. So it's a lot more than zero, right? Which is the status quo, where people have nothing. The way the benefit was set was that the legislature wanted to make sure that the premium was affordable. So they started out from the point of view of what would be an affordable premium, and they determined that about 0.5% of wages would be affordable for people. So that was their starting point. And then they asked the actuaries, well, if for that premium contribution, remember this is self-funded from premium. So they asked the actuaries, so if we have this pool of money, what can that buy? And the actuaries costed it out and determined that it would buy $36,500 worth of benefits starting in 2025. And then that could be increased with inflation over time. So if people want more insurance, if people want to pay more and have more insurance in return, they will be able to do so because we're working with private insurers to design supplemental products where if people want to buy an extra $50,000 worth of coverage, for example, maybe you'll be able to pay an additional $10 or $20 a month or $30 a month, whatever it may be, to buy additional coverage. So if you'd like more coverage, that should be available in the next few years. Just stay tuned, come back to our website, and if that does become available, we'll let you know. And you can buy more coverage if you so desire.
And also, I'd like to encourage Senator Hasagawa, Representative Hackney, or Mr. Locke to chime in. Also, if you have questions that we're not covering off on, I'm going to take one more from the Q&A, and I have a couple others that that I just get on an ongoing basis that I think a lot of people are thinking about. But the other question that's in the Q&A, it says, do I have an option to opt out if I cannot get vested because I will retire soon? That's, seems to be the popular question right now. And I think, at least from AARP's perspective, it's just buyer beware, that you can purchase a private plan, but understand what you're getting coverage for and what the lifetime cost of that plan is. And do you have a choice? Can you go to a nursing home? Can you use it for in-home care? Because I have seen numerous complaints to the Office of the Insurance Commissioner on this, and it just breaks my heart to see when claims are denied, which it seems like they should be paid out.
Sure. Currently you cannot opt out just because of your close to retirement, but the commission is aware of this issue, and what they're looking at is either making it possible for people close to retirement to voluntarily continue paying in order to vest, or just allowing them to be exempted based on their age, both of which would have to be kind of universal approaches. And they're still deliberating on that. And so they'll make a decision on what they're going to recommend later this year. And if it's ultimately up to the legislature to decide how to address that issue. What other, Kathy, I can't hear, you're on mute, Kathy, I think.
Sorry, I wanted to see if there were other questions that Senator Hasagawa, Representative Hackney, or Mr. Locke had that we haven't kind of covered off on as we wrap up the next 5 minutes or so here.
No, I think you guys did an excellent job. I think you guys did an excellent job, and I learned a lot as well, but it's also confirmed my views, and I think that as of now, this is the best public policy solution that's currently available.
It's the only solution that's currently available. I did want to, I had a question. What about if you don't work? So let me give you an example. I'm old school, I'm an OG, and I readily admit it. So when I was growing up, one person in the family, usually the father, made a living wage, and the mother was able to stay home, raise the kids. And we have gone from that type of society to one where now everybody under the roof is scrambling and has to work to make ends meet. And a lot of that is due to the union busting that's happened over the last several decades, and the shift in culture to maximizing profit over everything else. So, there still may be some people out there, households, where they believe that a parent should stay home and raise the family or whatever, which is the best thing for the child, actually. So what if they don't work? Do they get the benefit at some point? You still have to get the 500 hours per year to vest and get 3 vested years over the most current 6?
Well, most people, I think ultimately they probably would get the benefit, because if you raise, even if you have 2 or 3 kids, maybe you're home for 15, 20 years, but then as long as you work 10 years over your whole lifetime, you would vest in the program. So you just have to work 10 years out of a 35-year period of adulthood. You'd have to work about less than a third of that period, right? But if you don't work at all, then Medicaid is there for you. Medicaid is there for people who don't work, who can't work, or who are very low income. But this program works like Social Security or Medicare, where it's an earned benefit and you have to pay in order to vest. If family members were also covered, that's conceivable. Some other countries do that. The German system, for example, does cover spouses who stay at home, as you mentioned, but they have a much higher premium. Their premium is 3%. Ours is 0.5%. So we would just have to increase the premium accordingly to cover additional family members. But right now, this is priced very low, and as a result, it's just an individual benefit.
So can I ask another question? You were consulting with the EU, you said, but they have an infrastructure and a culture that is much different than here in the US. Part of that infrastructure is social housing, social health care, but also every EU country owns their own bank or a banking system.
Right.
So they're able to take their collected tax revenue and put it in and put it back to work in their own countries. We don't have that capacity to leverage our tax revenues, although we're trying to get there, but we haven't got there yet. So does that account for a significant difference between the returns on investment between EU countries that have long-term care programs and what the state of Washington can return?
So that's an interesting question. So the systems that exist in other countries are not a funded approach like ours, where the money accumulates in a trust fund and then gets invested. They have a pay-as-you-go approach where the money that comes in 1 year is also paid out in the same year, and then so it's a little bit different the way it's designed. But they do have, as you mentioned, the state, like postal banking, for example, right? And I was a postal banking customer in Germany, so I appreciate that reference. It's a great thing. I know for this program right now, that is an issue which is going to come before the voters again at some point, right? Whether we can invest in a more diversified portfolio or in fixed income investments. And I know that's an issue that's near and dear to your heart. So that's beyond my area of expertise, really. So I really can't speak to that, but I appreciate your comments.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I appreciate everyone coming. Any other last closing remarks, Representative Hackney and Mr. Locke?
I do not. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say thanks. Here's maybe I had a controversial question, but I know this is all paid by employees, and there's some very, very profitable corporations in Washington State. I was wondering if there was discussion around not necessarily hitting every business, but making it so the whole burden is not on the employee.
Kathy, do you want to speak? Or else, that's not really a question for me. I'm not sure if someone else wants to speak to that.
So the question is, why is it not on the employer as well?
Basically, I mean, I would think that a business that has a net profit over a certain amount would be able to contribute also, rather than just the employee.
That's a good question.
I can speak to it briefly, Kathy. I did a policy brief comparing all the existing systems abroad and how they're financed, and some of them have employer contributions, some of them have just employee contributions, some have only employer contributions, some have only employee, and some have a mixture. And you really can do, there's a whole menu of approaches there, depending on how the economy works and the relationship of the economy to the worker, and every country has a different culture about that. Our paid leave system is funded the way that you're talking about, right? With employers paying a part of the contribution and employees. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I think here, part of the thought was that, paid leave is something you get while you're working, whereas this is a benefit you get often 20 years after you left your company or 30 years after you left your company. So maybe that was the thinking, but it could be done, it could be done that way. Certainly, there's a lot of different ways you could do it.
And I thank Sid for that question, because I think it's really an important question. You know, a similar tactic happened when we passed the capital gains tax, where only quote unquote natural persons had to pay the capital gains, and it let corporations off the hook. So my feeling is this is such an important issue. It should be funded out of the general fund, and we should fund it accordingly, raise revenue accordingly so that we can fund it appropriately. That means spreading the tax burden across more lives and more wealthy entities. But we didn't do that. So this is what we got. And, you know, I support it, but I think it's got issues that really should be addressed.
Well, again, thank you. I really appreciate the much more in-depth conversation and discussion that we're having, because, you know, public policy is complex, to say the least. And, you know, I have my master's in it, and it just, there is always challenges of, you know, equity and trying to find, you know, is it a utilitarian solution or is it an equitable solution? And that is really, really challenging. So I appreciate the time. Again, there was information and resources I will be sharing with each of your offices, so that if you have additional questions, I'll also cut and paste the questions that we had today and send those to your offices, along with a link to this webinar. But again, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and thank you to our attendees. And hopefully, if you have more questions, please share those with the links that are provided, or contact your legislator. Again, good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.